Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia Daf Lamed Zayin. We're going to get started from the bottom of Lamed Vav Amud Bet where we ended. We saw that we paskin like Rabbi Yosi in our Mishna, who says the socher can't possibly make money off by lending it to somebody else when he or she is actually renting out the object. It's not their object to make money off of. And then we saw that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, we actually hold like Rabbi Yosi. So comes Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, which is not the same Shmuel and not the same Yehuda, but Shmuel, the son of Yehuda, asks Rav Yehuda, Amar la mishmei de Shmuel, chaluk haya Rabbi Yosi af b'rishona. You told us that Rabbi Yosi, you said in the name of Shmuel, that Rabbi Yosi also disagrees with the first Mishnah of our chapter, which was, if you remember, you give someone kelim to watch, and it's stolen, and the person decides, the shomer says, I don't want to take an oath and exempt myself, pays the money for the theft, and write a shomer chinam, and then they find the thief. The shomer chinam gets the kefel and the 4 or 5 payment. To which they say Rabbi Yosi, according to Shmuel, also disagrees in that case, because again, you have the same situation. The shomer is making money off of someone else's object. To which we ask, though, comes Shmuel bar Yehuda and says, but halakha k'moto and halakha k'moto. Now, I understand you said that we paskin like Rabbi Yosi in our Mishnah. And then you said that Rabbi Yosi also disagrees about the other Mishnah. Do we paskin like Rabbi Yosi as well in that Mishnah? Amar le, chaluk haya Rabbi Yosi af b'rishona, v'halakha k'moto af b'rishona. So Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, Shmuel said, not only does Rabbi Yosi disagree, but we actually hold like Rabbi Yosi also on the first Mishnah. For Rabbi Yochanan omer, modeh haya Rabbi Yosi b'rishona, shekvar shilem. So now they bring Rabbi Yochanan, who says that Rabbi Yosi agreed from the beginning, Rabbi Shona, shekvar shilem. In that case, on the first case, he agrees with Tanakama because in that case, doesn't disagree because there, the person paid, the shomer chinam paid the value of the item and with that acquired the item. And that's why they get kefel. That's not at all the same here. Shilem in, lo shilem lo. But in our case, the socher didn't pay, and compensate for the animal that died, and therefore it shouldn't acquire rights. And that's where Rabbi Yosi disagrees with Tanakama here, but he wouldn't disagree with him on the Mishnah. But wait, didn't Rabbi Chia bar Abba say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, lo shilem mamash, ela kevan she'amar hareinu mishalem, af al pi shelo shilem. When we say that the person paid, and on account of the fact that they paid, they gained the rights to get the kefel, the double payment, right? The shomer chinam, that doesn't actually have to pay. It's as long as the person said, I'm going to pay, even if they hadn't yet paid. But if they committed in court, I will pay, instead of taking an oath, they already gained the rights to the kefel. So how could you quote Rabbi Yochanan as saying, only if you paid? To which they said, no. Ema modeh haya Rabbi Yosi b'rishona, shekvar amar hareinu mishalem. No, Rabbi Yosi agrees in the first case of our chapter, because the person said hareinu mishalem. In other words, it's not because they actually paid, it's just once they commit to paying. They just couched it in those terms, but it really meant once they commit to paying. So again, in the first case, in the first Mishnah, they committed to pay. Okay, whether they paid or didn't pay, it doesn't matter, but the commitment to pay already acquired them the rights to the kefel. Whereas when we're talking about our Mishnah, where there, the socher didn't pay at all, didn't pay anything. They actually, and didn't commit to pay anything. They don't get any rights to it according to Rabbi Yosi, and that's in fact the way we hold. So we have a debate between Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan about whether Rabbi Yosi disagrees with the first Mishnah as well. With that, we'll move on to the next Mishnah. Amar l'shnayim, gazalti le'echad mikem maneh, ve'eni yodea eze mikem. Case number 1. Somebody goes over to 2 people and says, I stole from one of you 100 zuzim. I don't know which one though. Oh, aviv shel echad mehem hivkid li maneh. Or, not that I stole, but your father gave me 100 zuz. And Eini Yodea Ezehu. And I don't know which one. Was it your father or your father? Noten lezemaneh ulezemaneh shehodemi piatzma. The owner here pays the one who claims either he or she stole or he or she was given a pikadon to watch. They say, okay, since you don't know which one, and both cases, notice they're picking a case where someone was stolen from, so they don't know necessarily if maybe they both got stolen from and they don't know if he was the one who stole or their father gave him money. They have no idea. Was it our father or my father, your father? It wasn't a case where they would really know. And since the person came forward and admitted this information, I have money for one of you, I don't know who, either because I stole or because I was watching something, then they actually have to pay both people. Similar case, Shnayim Shivkidu, but with a big minor variation, or big, I shouldn't say big minor, a minor variation, which turns out to be big. Shnayim Shivkidu Etzel Echad, Zemaneh v'Zematayim. Two people came and gave you an item, gave you money to watch. One gave you 100, one gave you 200. Each one says, oh, I was the one who gave you 200. You give each one 100. We actually learned this case before. And then we leave the rest until Eliyahu comes, because we know at least they each gave 100. So therefore, they can each get 100. But nobody gets the extra 100. We leave it till we have more clarity. Amar Rabbi Yosi, that's what it means until Eliyahu comes, until we have clarification. It doesn't necessarily mean the Eliyahu and Avi, only when he comes will we get the clarification. What it means is if somehow we come up with more evidence. Amar Rabbi Yosi, here comes again our Rabbi Yosi, right? He has a lot of disagreements with the Tanakama in our mishnayot. He says, if so, what's to prevent anybody from lying and always claiming in a case like that, I'm the one who gave 200, because they have nothing to lose. In order to prevent one of the sides from lying, so, which basically, because let's say, right, I'm not the one who gave you the 200, but I could just claim it because maybe I'll get lucky and you'll split it 50-50. And if you don't and you leave it, well, then the other side's going to lose entirely. So that's unfair that I should be able to penalize them and end up having them wait and not get any of their money back. So therefore, in order to prevent people like me from lying and saying I was the one with the 200 when it really wasn't me, we leave the entire thing until there's clarity. So nobody gets anything back, and that penalty will hopefully discourage me from lying. Now we're going to have the same case we said we had before, but with a vessel. Okay, the same case as this last case we just had. And at the end of today's daf, we're going to say, why do we have both cases? What's the point? They're both the same thing. Or close enough, and then we'll see what's the difference. We have two nice vessels. One is only worth 100 zuz, and one is worth 1,000 zuz. So each one claims that 1,000 zuz kli was the one that they gave the person to watch. And the person doesn't remember who's who. So he gives the small one to one of them, and then takes the big one and breaks it into pieces or sells it and ends up with the value and gives the value of the small vessel to the other person, so that they each end up with equal value at least. They won't each have a vessel, but they'll at least have equal value. We read, and then we leave the rest till Eliyahu comes or till there's clarification. Amar Rabbi Yosi, again, Rabbi Yosi says in Kema Afsir Ramai. So the exact same machloket as with the money, just this is with an object. So we leave with the entire thing until Eliyahu comes. So now we're going to start with the beginning of the Mishnah. And now we're going to have a series of contradictions of different sources. So we're going to start with our Mishnah. The first case is, he says to two people, I stole from one of you, and I'm not sure which one. Okay, or your father gave me a pikadon, and I don't know which one. So one of you, right? Now, the person who says this comes and offers in Modeh Mipi Atzmo, made a confession here, basically has to pay both, has to shell out double the amount of money. So Alma misveka mafkina mamona. What you see from here is we can remove money from people's possession, even though we're in doubt. Obviously, this person doesn't know 200, they only know 100, and yet we make them pay. Normally, when there's a doubt, what do we say? The person who wants to get the money out of someone else has to prove it. The burden of proof is on them. So maybe we should leave the money with the person who says, I stole from one of you, I'm just not sure which one, right? And this contradicts okay, in case you didn't believe us that which we already know, but now they're going to prove it. And it contradicts the following. And in fact, it's the end of our Mishnah, or the middle of our Mishnah. So here you owe 100, 200. So each one gets 100. So what do you see here? Why do you leave it till Eliyahu comes? Why don't we just say you have to give each one 200, like the beginning of the Mishnah said? So there's really a contradiction in the Mishnah itself. To which the Gemara answers, Amalei, which immediately will say this isn't a great answer, but let's listen first. Pikadon agezel karamit, you're taking a pikadon case and a theft case. Having someone say, I stole something, is different than someone saying, your father gave me something to watch. So case A in the Mishnah, where he says, I stole from one of you and I'm not sure which one. So he or she has to pay both people because they stole. But that's not the same as a pikadon. In the manema time, we don't make the person who said, your father gave me this stuff to watch, shell out double because they were just a watch. They were watching the item. They weren't trying to, they didn't steal. They didn't do anything wrong. So pikadon gezel karami, what, you're throwing a case of pikadon against a case of theft? Gezel de avedi sura knasur rabbanat. So the rabbis penalized the person who did some sin. But pikadon de lo avedi sura lo knasur rabbanat. But the rabbis didn't penalize for a pikadon. Now that sounds very nice, but if you were paying attention to details, the first case in the Mishnah had two parts to it. One was you said, now you have to pay both people in two different cases. One is you say, I stole from one of you, I'm not sure who. The other is you said, your fathers gave me a pikadon to watch, right? One, and each gave, one of your fathers gave 100. The other one didn't give anything, and I'm not sure which one, and you have to pay 100 to each. So that's a pikadon case. That contradicts the other pikadon case. So the gezel pikadon answer doesn't really work. And that's what they're going to say right now. Urami pikadon, a pikadon, urami gezel, a gezel. So they're going to say, well, then we have a contradiction with the pikadon cases and the gezel cases. So let's see what that is. Pikadon, I already said. Because the katani reisha, o aviv shalachem hivkid etzli maneh ve'eni yodea ezehu. One of your fathers gave me something to watch, and I'm not sure which one. Noten lezemaneh or lezemaneh. And then reminu shnayim shivkidu, one maneh, one matayim, where the money in doubt, we leave. So in one case, we say the money in doubt, we make you pay. Anyway, you have to pay double and take money out of your hands, even though we're not sure. And the other one, we say, no, we leave it. The money that's in doubt, we leave. So Amarava, Reisha nasa kemishif kidu lo b'shtei krichot, dahava le'lamedak. So now Rava comes and tries to give an answer, and only toward the end of today's daf, we're going to go back to Rava and ask a question on this. The order is a little bit strange, but Rava basically says the reason is because the beginning case, when one of them gave, it's like hivkidu lo b'shnei krichot, dahava le'lamedak. There was a separate transaction here, okay? In fact, there was only really one transaction. And therefore, he should have remembered who gave it to him. But seifa nasa kemishiv kidu lo b'kerech echad, de lo hava le'lamedak, kigon dav kidu travayu b'hadi adadi b'chad zimna. Well, the second case is a case where each one gave, and then it gets confusing who gave. If it's a matter of, did this person give or did that person give, then you should know. You should have paid attention. And therefore, you're at fault for not noticing who gave you what. Or, sorry, which one actually gave it to you. That's, one is a non-transaction, one is a transaction. Those are two totally different things. You shouldn't have confused them. But in the case, and therefore we're going to penalize you, in the case each one gave 100 or 200, and you're not sure which one, it's because it's as if they gave it to you at the same time. And in fact, they're going to say perhaps they even did give it to you at the same time. Because, right, kigon, like for example, they gave it together all in one moment. This one gave 200, this one gave 100. You can imagine it gets confusing. Da'amar lahu, he could say to them, and then there's even one more point. It's not just that it's confusing for the person receiving the money, but they can even claim, Ant gufaychu lo kpidatu ahadade, ana kapidna. The fact that you both came at the same time to give me money to watch shows that you trusted each other. Because if you didn't trust each other, you would have made sure to come separately and make sure I wrote it all down. But you came all at the same time, which shows that you had trust in each other. So if you trust each other, what? I shouldn't trust you? So I should trust you that you'll be the one to tell me, be honest with me. If you trusted each other, then you should trust, then I obviously could trust you too. And therefore, I didn't do anything wrong by not paying close enough attention as to who is who. Okay. That was the pikadon, and that resolves the beginning of the Mishnah with the second part of the Mishnah, and the fact that why we distinguish gezel pikadon when the first part also has pikadon, but we resolved. Now, we're going to say urami gezel a gezel. Well, there's also a contradiction with a theft case and a theft case. Katane hacha, it says here, Amar l'shnayim gazalti lecha mikem maneh ve'eni yodea ez mikem. I stole from one of you, I don't know which one. Oh, aviv shelecha mikem kili maneh ve'eni yodea ez. Okay, they don't really need to quote that part, but they quoted it because you need the end, which is the halacha. Noten lezemaneh ulezemaneh. Each one you have to pay 100 to. Urimini, but that contradicts a Mishnah in Yevamot. And from here, we're going to get off on a tangent into this Mishnah in Yevamot, which you might remember. It's because it had to do with a suffix about 5 women. Then we get to a suffix about 5 men, right? Where the guy says, "I betrothed one of you. I'm not sure which one." And then what do they do to get out of the yibum issue if the guy dies, and then we don't know which one he was betrothed to. Anyway, Rimini. That's not our important. We're going to deal with the theft case that was compared to that case. Gazal chamisha. You steal money from one of 5 people. Ve'eno yodea eze mihen. And you're not sure which one you stole from. Ze omer oti gazal, ze omer oti gazal, and each of the 5 say, you stole from me. So each one comes with the claim, you stole from me, and you actually have no idea who you stole from. Miniach zela benhem umistalek divrei Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon says, you put the stolen item in the middle, and you go, and they fight over it. So okay, we're not going to focus on so much the element that they're going to fight over it and who wins and kol da'alin gvar, whoever's stronger maybe wins and what it's all based on. But we're going to focus on the fact that you could just put it down and be done with it. Now, in our Mishnah, what does it say? You have to pay each one. So why don't you have to pay times 5? And in fact, we're going to see Rabbi Akiva disagrees there, which we'll get to. But what do you see from Rabbi Tarfon? Misfeika lo mafkina mamona. Right? You see that out of Sefik, we don't make you pay more. We don't make you pay times 5. And it's not a difference, 2 people, 5 people. That wouldn't matter. And we say, we leave you with your money. In other words, you pay your one-time amount, but the rest of it, you're not obligated to pay until someone can prove, that they're the one. But you pay what you were supposed to pay and done with it. So now, and then they say, Rabbi Tarfon. You're raising a contradiction from Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Akiva disagrees and says you actually have to pay each one. So basically, the question is, why is that? Just one second. I want to check. Right. You have to pay according to Rabbi Akiva to each person. So why don't you just say our Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva? That's the easiest resolution. But they're going to assume our Mishnah is Rabbi Tarfon. And why is that? On Yevamot, on that Mishnah, there was a braita. Sometimes you have braitot that explain mishnayot. So the braita there said, "Model Rabbi Tarfon pomer l'shnayim gazalti lecha mikem maneh ve'eni yodea eze mikem shenoten lezemaneh lezemaneh." Well, Rabbi Tarfon there admits, which we don't really understand because it sounds like the total opposite of the Mishnah Yevamot, but Rabbi Tarfon admits to Rabbi Akiva in our case, where you said to 2 people, "I stole from one of you, and I'm not sure which one," that you give each one 100. So that means that Rabbi Tarfon agrees with our Mishnah. So how do we resolve the contradiction? Now, we also have to resolve why did Rabbi Tarfon admit in that case? Why is that any different from the case of Yevamot? It's all really one and the same. So hatam de katavele, hacha bebalatzeti de shamayim. So now we're going to distinguish between the 2 cases. In the case of Yevamot, when he says you only have to just put it down and you're done, that's because they demand it, right? They each say there, give me what I'm owed, give me what I'm owed, right? And then, so to fulfill your obligation, all you have to do is put the money down. It's not your problem to get it to the person. I mean, it should ideally be, but in this case, we don't know. Out of suffix, we're not going to make you pay more. But in our case, remember what happened in our case, and we're going to see this in a minute. Maybe I'll read one more line. Our Mishnah is bebalatzeti de shamayim. You want to be good in the eyes of God. In other words, you don't want to just do the letter of the law. You want to make sure that you've done what you're supposed to do, but in God's eyes. And daikanami dekatani, how can we prove that from our Mishnah that that's our case and that's why you have to pay double? Because dekatani hodami piatzmo shmamina. The person came forward and confessed. That's not the same. In the Mishnah Yevamot, somebody stole. The 5 people say, it was me. They're all demanding the money. Okay, by law, all you have to do is put it down. But when it comes to our case, where the person confessed, that's a whole different story. If you confess, you're looking to deal with things on a level with God. If you remember Bava Kama, we discussed this about the Korban Asham, that only comes when you confess. That's a whole different level. That's God level. This is human level. Human level, well, you fulfilled your obligation. It's their problem to try to prove they're the ones who got stolen from. But when you're trying to do it on a level with God, well, then deal with it on a different level. You have to go beyond that and pay everybody. And therefore, we've resolved our contradictions. But we're going to have more contradictions. Amar Hatan de Katavele, V'hala Matoen. So now we're going to assume that in the Mishnah, in Yevamot, right, that's what we're talking about right now, they came and made a claim. Everybody said, you stole from me. And hala matoen. So now, when it says that the person, let's just go back to the wording of the Mishnah. Okay, I want to get it clear. The wording of the Mishnah is, Gazal echam mechamisha ve'eno yodea eni yodea me'ezeh mehem gazal. I don't know which one. And each one said, me. So what did this person say? So Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, halash shotek. He was silent. Okay? We know, right? So Rashi says, Mato en lechol echad, katani miniach zela benehem u'mistalek. When it says you just leave it there, right? Well, what did the person say? I don't know if I stole from you. Like, we're not sure what they said. So they said, shotek. Rav Matna Amar Rav, in other words, there's different opinions about what Rav said. Rav said, person was just silent. I don't know. And Rav Matna Amar Rav, halat soveach. So what does it mean, halat soveach? Rashi says, Amar lechol echad, eini mikircha. He said to each one, I don't recognize you at all. And yeah. So either the person was silent, which could be understood as different things. But one opinion said the person was silent. One opinion said the person said, I don't know who you are. So let's understand. Manda amar halat soveach. If you say, he said, I don't know who you are, aval shtika. But if they were silent, it's kehoda'ah. Well, then we always say shtika kehoda'ah. If shtika is like a hoda'ah, it means the person was admitting, confessing. If they were confessing, right, you can have a silent confession. Someone says you're guilty and then you just don't answer. That means you agree. That means the person should have to pay times 5 because it's like our Mishnah. So the one who says it's only if the person said, I don't know who you are, I didn't steal from you, then they only have to put one item down in the middle and the people can fight over it. But if they were silent, that would be admitting and they'd have to pay times 5. But manda amar halashote, you could say that shtika dahaka lav kodahu. Maybe this kind of shtika, even though normally silence is considered a confession, in this case it's not. I was silent because I honestly don't know which one I stole from. So I was silent because I had nothing to say, because the fact is I don't know the facts. So my silence in this case shouldn't be understood as admission. Okay, so we have this debate about whether silence in this case would be admission, in which case I'd have to pay times 5, or whether silence here is not admission at all. Amar Mar, another issue we're going to go back to. Amar Mar is basically quoting something we saw previously. So quoting this Mishnah Yevamot, Minyach zela berehem u'mistalek. So again, how did we get to this Mishnah Yevamot? Because we were trying to bring up contradictions. First, we started with contradictions within the Mishnah itself, where in some cases you have to pay double, and in some cases you don't have to pay at all. Right, you leave it. In other words, the money in question, not that you don't have to pay it all, but the money in question stays in question. Nobody gets it. We leave it in the hands of the owner. Or, by the way, Yehei Munach sometimes means the owner doesn't keep it, but we put it like an escrow account. But we don't give it to anybody. And then we first tried to say Gezel Pikadon, right? Theft versus watching an item, because theft, there's a sin involved. Then we said, but Pikadon, there's a contradiction. And that we resolved by saying, well, it depends. Just remember, right? Pikadon was, it depends which, right, how you got it. If it's in one bundle, then you should have paid more, then it's not your fault. If it was 2 separate bundles, which really means one of them gave you, the other one didn't, then it was your fault for not remembering. And then you become at fault, and then you have to pay each person. Then we said, what about Gezel? A Gezel, there's a contradiction, and that's the Gezel in our Mishnah compared to the Gezel in the theft in our Mishnah, where you have to pay double, compared to the theft in the Yibum case, or not Yibum case, but the one mentioned in Yevamot, where you don't have to pay each one. And again, we had to prove that our Mishnah is Rabbi Tarfon, and therefore disagrees with Rabbi Tarfon's opinion there. And then we got into a few side issues about this Mishnah. So the last issue here is Miniach Gzela, even though we're going to get to Rabbi Akiva then in that Mishnah also, but let's just finish up with this part of Rabbi Tarfon. Miniach Gzela mi benehem u'mistalek. So v'shakle le kule va'azlu. Why don't? Okay, so what does he do? He leaves it and he goes. So now they're going to say, v'shakle le kulu va'azle. V'hamar Rabbi Abba bar Zav damar Rav kol safek kinuach lechatchila lo yitol v'natal lo yachzir. So now we have a problem because the Gemara asks, we're going to have a further contradiction with some other source. It says here, you leave it and you go. Now, we assumed, what did that mean? We weren't focusing on this yet, but that they can take it. Someone there can take it, or they can fight over it, they can split it, okay, whatever they decide to do. So now they say, could they really take it? Didn't Rabbi Abba bar Zav say in the name of Rav, ko safek kinuach? Okay, this really is talking about a lost item. I find a lost item on the street, and it doesn't have any siman where I can find the original owner, and I'm concerned that the way it's left on the street looks like it might be that the owner left it there on purpose, and it's not actually a lost item. So if it's that, lechatchila lo yitol, I can't take. Ve'im natal lo yachzir. But if I took it already, I don't have to return. Okay? Which means basically that if someone came to me later and said, here's a siman, right? So I don't have to give it to them. Why? Because maybe it's not really theirs. Okay? Because, I'm sorry, not that they have a siman. They don't have a siman. That was the whole problem. So if I took it, I'm not supposed to take it, but if I did take it, and then someone says, well, why'd you take that? It's mine, but they don't have a way to prove it, then I don't have to give it back. Okay, so even though I shouldn't have taken it, once I take it, it's already mine. Okay, so now the issue becomes, really what it says here is, you're supposed to, though, safek kinuach lechatchila lo yitol, you should just leave. You shouldn't give it to anybody. Okay, so that's what we see here. Safek kinuach lechatchila lo yitol, you're not allowed to take it. Okay, and if the person tries to claim it, you're not allowed to even give it to them. So why here do we let the people take it? Doesn't make any sense. It should be a safek. We don't know whose it is. We should leave it. And it should be like left till Eliyahu comes. So Amar Rav Safra v'yanyah. When it says, it means if I'm the one who stole, I have to put the item down. But they don't split it. Forget this called the aling var, whoever's stronger, or they have to make some arrangement between themselves. No. I put it down. I've done what I've done. I've given back the money, even though no one's gotten the money, and we leave it like in an escrow account. So now we understand Rabbi Tarfon differently than we thought in the beginning, but again, not in terms of an issue that was relevant to us at the time. We were really focusing on my having to pay or not to pay. But now we're discussing, what about the other people? Do they actually get to keep it? And the answer is, according to now, no, they don't get to keep it, because that seems to contradict. Okay, that you can't really take it. And even if you do take it, you don't give it to anybody because they don't have a way to really claim it. Now we're going to go to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, did Rabbi Akiva really say what they quote him as saying in this Mishnah? So we didn't read this yet, but Rabbi Akiva says, Lo zo haderech mosiato midei avira. That doesn't help you. If you stole one from one of 5 people and you don't know, well, that's your problem. You have to pay to each and every one of those people. What do you see here? Out of a safek, we make you pay. We're going to have to pay times 5. That's what I told you. It doesn't matter 2, 5. You have to pay everybody. And we don't say, leave the money in the hands of the original owner. No. So that's one source. That's Rabbi Akiva. And that's going to contradict what Rabbi Akiva says elsewhere. Uriminhi. And this contradicts the following source. This is a Mishna in Bava Batra, which is talking about inheritance. So let's go back to basic laws of inheritance. If a man dies, the heirs are the sons. If his sons are no longer, it goes to his brothers, okay, or his father, or then his brothers, okay, and it goes back up. So if no sons, then it goes to his father. If not that, then to the brothers. It all goes through the males. If a woman dies, all her possessions go to her husband if she dies before the husband. But if he dies first, then she dies, then her property goes to her sons. If she doesn't have sons, it goes to her heirs, like her father, and then her brothers. So we have a situation where nafal habayit alava alimo. The house falls on the mother and her only son at the same time. Now let's just assume this son had brothers from his father, okay, but no other brothers that he shared with the mother. He was the only heir of the mother. So now the question becomes, when the house fell down on both of them, we don't know who died first. And it's very relevant who died first. Yorshei haben, the heirs of the son, let's say his brother, claim, right, his brother through his father, say, meta rishona. The mother died first. Now, when the mother died, it went to her son, because he's first in line. And therefore, when it went to the son, and then the son died even a minute later, well, when the son died, then we get, because we inherit the brother. And Yorshei ha'em, let's say her father's still alive or her brother, claimed the reverse. Haben met rishon. First the son died, which means that when she died, she had no heirs left. And therefore it goes to us, and that she had no heirs from her husband anymore. So therefore she had no son anymore. We get it.
Elu ve'elu is Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, who have other arguments about these kind of cases where we're not sure whose it is. Elu ve'elu modim she'achloku. They both agree that in this case we split it 50-50. The Amar Rabbi Akiva, here's the key for our issue. Rabbi Akiva says, Modeh ani bizo. Okay, even though, this actually means even though I generally on those cases agree with Beit Shammai, which is interesting, but we'll deal with all that when we get to Bava Batra. Modeh ani bizo shanachasim b'chazkatan. But I do agree in this case that the money stays with the original owner. Now, what that means in this case is a good question, and the Amoraim have a whole debate about this in Bava Batra, which is not our sugya for today, so we're not going to focus on that. But what it clearly shows is that this disagrees with what Rabbi Akiva said before, which is you have to pay money in a case of debt, and you have to pay to each of the 5 people. So there, we basically say we have this contradiction between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Akiva, and now we'll see how the Gemara resolves it.
Amarle, hatam shema v'shema. You're comparing apples and oranges. In the case of the house falling on, why does he say the money stays where it is? Because each claim was an undefinitive claim. Nobody really knew what happened. Nobody was in the house when the people died. So therefore, we leave the money where it is because each one has a maybe claim. I don't know. Maybe me, maybe me. Because what's the case? Each one says you stole from me. They each make a definitive claim. And what's the thief's claim? I don't know. So that's Bari V'Shema. And Bari V'Shema, we say the one who has a definitive claim gets to win out. In this case, there's 5 people with definitive claims. Now, obviously, they're not all telling the truth. But they each come with a definite, I know I was the one stolen from. Go prove otherwise. So they have a lot more power than the one who stole, who says, I have no idea who I stole from. And therefore, you're comparing 2 different cases. And that's where Rabbi Akiva says different things in each case. But wait a minute. Our Mishna is a case of Shema v'Shema. He says, I gave one of you and I'm not sure which one. And Shema v'Shema, what do we say? We leave the money where it is. What does our Mishnah say? Katani noten lezemane ulezemane. So if you're saying Shema v'Shema, we leave the money, according to Rabbi Akiva, well, that doesn't work with our Mishnah. Umimai Rabbi Akiva, who he. Now, how do you know our Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva? You could just say our Mishnah doesn't hold by Rabbi Akiva. Well, the Katani alei dahi, it says in the other case, if you remember in the Mishnah, in Yevamot, there was a braita that said, Modeh Rabbi Tarfon bo'omer l'shnayim gazalti lecha mikem maneh ve'eni yodea ez mikem. Now, what did Rabbi Tarfon say? But I do agree with you, Rabbi Akiva, in a case where they stole from, right? I stole from one of 2 people and I don't know which one. And then he agrees with Rabbi Akiva. Now, liman modeh, the Rabbi Akiva bar plukte. He obviously agrees with Rabbi Akiva, which means he's basically saying to Rabbi Akiva, but I agree with you in the case of our Mishnah, which means that Rabbi Akiva holds this way in the case of our Mishnah. So if we're making a claim that Rabbi Akiva distinguishes between Shema, and in Shema he wouldn't make you pay everyone, well, he does in our Mishnah, because our Mishnah is Shema v'Shema. Now, the Gemara says, Mimai de Shema v'Shema. How do you know our Mishnah is Shema v'Shema? What did it say in our Mishnah? Let's just go back. He says to 2 people, Gazalti lecha mikem, and I'm not sure which one. Now, it doesn't say what they claimed. So how do we know that it's Shema v'Shema? Well, Chada, firstly, we're going to prove it. Lo katani tovinoto. It doesn't say they brought him to court. Ve'od hatani Rabbi Chia ze omer. And by the way, not only are they not tovimoto, but if you remember, right, they weren't saying you stole from me. He came forward and admitted it on his own. So it sounds like there is no definitive claim from either of the parties. And od hatani Rabbi Chia ze omer eni yodea v'ze omer eni yodea. Rabbi Chia added words to the Mishnah. He basically had a braita that said the same thing as our Mishnah and said, our Mishnah is talking about when each side says Ein Yodeh. So we now have a contradiction with Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva there in the Bava Batra case seemed to say, or actually it was, right, in the Bava Batra case, he said, we leave the money. Why do we leave the money? Shema v'shema. But our Mishnah Shema v'shema, we don't say leave the money, we say you have to pay. So how can we explain that? Wait, didn't we already explain our Mishnah that the person was confessing, which means that they wanted to fulfill their obligation, again, with God, which means they want to pay everybody, and that's why they pay double. And this has nothing to do with what by the letter of the law in a court of law they can obligate. And that's what Rabbi Kiva was talking about in the case of Bava Batra. So, and that's where Shema v'Shema, you don't actually have to pay both sides. You know, you can't, or in that case, it's just don't take money, don't remove money from its place, right? If you don't have proof, you can't get it. So with that, we resolve all the contradictions. Now, Amar le Ravina le Ravashi, Umi Amar Rava. Now I told you we were going to go back. When I mentioned Rava at the time, Rava had resolved one of the first contradictions we had with Shtei Krichot and Kricha Achat, that there's the people, right? If you do look at the Pikadon and Pikadon, it wasn't the first, it was the second contradiction. Pikadon against the Pikadon case, one is that the person should have paid attention because it all came in separate. One came in and the other one didn't even come in at all, and they should have paid attention. When the two people come together, you understand they confuse the cases. So Miyamar Rava, Kol Shtei Krichot, what? If things come separately, what? You're supposed to pay attention? And it's your responsibility. The Rava Rav Papa says, two people, let's say it was with a shepherd. Two people gave the shepherd animals. One gave them one animal, one gave them two. That the roeh just leaves the animal and goes. And even though, right, they gave it separately, no, I guess here it would be they gave it at the same time and should have paid attention, right? So here the assumption is that when each person gave the sheep, it was on a separate occasion. So now they say, no, you can just assume that that was when they gave him sheep to watch without actually telling him about it. He didn't even know, he wasn't there when they gave him the sheep, and that's why he's and all he has to do is put the sheep and be done with it, because it must be a case where he didn't know he wasn't giving it to him. So that doesn't contradict at all. That was a minor contradiction. And now we're going to get back to the first question we asked, or one of the questions we asked when we saw the case in the Mishnah of two kelim, and one is bigger, one is smaller. What do? We sell it or break it up and split it up into parts. Each one gets the value. One gets the small vessel, one gets the value of the small vessel that was taken from the big vessel. Why is that any different from the Manamatayim case? And with that, we'll end for today. Utsricha. So one is worth 100, one is worth 1,000. What do? Utsricha. So there we have the exact same machloket as Rabbi Yosi and the Tanakama in the previous case. Do we split what we know and leave the rest, or do we leave the whole thing because we're worried about a ramai, about somebody cheating? Utsricha. If you only had the first case about the money, you would say, in that case, everybody gets back their 100 because there's no loss to anybody by giving them each 100. The one who owns the big item is going to lose because their item got sold. You were probably thinking what we read the Mishnah, which is, but what if it's this beautiful candelabra you own, and now it's gone because they sold it and you just get the money for it. That's not always replaceable. So Rabbi Yosi, maybe they would agree with Rabbi Yosi that we leave the whole thing. And that's why they needed to say no. And if you would have it by us, by the Kli case, by the candelabra, let's say, you would say, Bahaka Amar Rabbi Yosi. That's what Rabbi Yosi says, leave the whole thing until Eliyahu comes or until we get clarity. But maybe in this case, you would think that Rabbi Yosi would agree with the rabbis. Let's just finish up the next few lines. But on the next page, but wait, Rabbi Yosi you can't think Rabbi Yosi would have changed just because there's no loss because they can each get $100. His whole thing was premised on, we want to preclude people from cheating. So you can't say that. So therefore they say, really, really both cases are needed to highlight the rabbi's opinion, not Rabbi Yosi, because Rabbi Yosi, once he holds that, it's obvious he's going to hold it in both. V'lo zo av zo katani. And the order is like this. Not only did the rabbi say we split it 50-50 when each one can get 100 and nobody loses out, but even if it's a vessel, and by splitting it, one is really losing, they're a nice big item, still, we're going to split it and give everybody the value, at least, of their original item. Okay, with that, we finished today's daf, and we finished till the next Mishnah. So what we saw today, we started with the beginning part about Rabbi Yosi and the previous Rabbi Yosi, the previous machloket about how can you make money using someone else's item. We said that we had a machloket. Does he disagree also in the first case of the first Mishnah in our chapter? And we also said we hold like him, but it wasn't clear whether he disagrees or not. Then we moved on to this next Mishnah, which had a bunch of cases that contradicted each other, contradicted other sources, and we had to try to work out all the different contradictions and discuss how these cases are different from each other, which really gets back to all these basic cases of money that we're not sure about. How do we handle it? And what are the principles that we employ? Shema v'shema, bari v'bari. Were you cheating or lying or stealing? In other words, were you transgressing something, or were you just watching an item? And all the different parameters that we factor in to trying to figure out, and obviously differences of opinion about, when we expect you to remember, when we don't, shtei kricha, one kricha, all different types of issues that come up in trying to determine cases of doubt. With that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everybody a good day and a Shabbat Shalom.